8:37 here, Big 550 KTRS. Another year, calendar changes, but one thing remains the same. David Stokes on Mondays from the Show Me Institute. Good morning, David Stokes.
Good morning, McGraw. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning.
And congratulations on the airing on Channel 11 starting at 9 o'clock.
How about that, huh?
This is great.
Yeah, maybe if you get nice to us, we'll put you in the 9 o'clock hour.
Well, I guess I'll have to start being nice, apparently. I didn't know I was being mean.
All right. The Show Me Institute, you're a policy analyst with the Show Me Institute. And somebody from the Show Me Institute wrote a New Year's Eve op-ed piece for STLtoday.com.
We did. It was Andrew Wilson, who's our senior fellow. There's a lot of writing for us.
Yes.
And the Post-Dispatch was kind enough to print this. I believe they printed it on the 31st, which we greatly appreciated.
Sure.
And yeah, it's a list of 5 New Year's resolutions for state and local policymakers in Missouri.
And one of them is, all right, so let's go through them. You want to go through all 5?
I would love to.
All right, let's start with number 1.
Stop the central planning. Stop government directing the economy. And here's the basic stats. Over the last 16 years, Missouri's ranked 49th out of 50 states in average state economic growth. Only Michigan trails Missouri.
and their number 1 industry imploded.
Right. Just sort of went away. So here's the other thing is that according to the Mercatus Center at George Washington University,
yes,
we're also one of the top 10 most generous states for corporate welfare.
Huh.
So whatever you think about how Missouri should go in economic policy, I mean, clearly being extremely generous at the state and local level with corporate welfare isn't working.
Right.
So let's stop central planning. Central planning doesn't have to mean like a Stalin 5-year plan or Mao's planning. It can also just be that city says that only a retail store subsidized is going to go in on that corner because we want the sales tax revenue.
Right.
That's central planning too, and it's not working in Missouri.
You know, that also sort of feeds its way into the Ferguson Police Department argument as well, because the reason why St. Anne needs to remain St. Anne and they need to take tax revenue away from the next town over is because they don't have any tax revenue. So they need to get some sales tax revenue, so they steal it from the next town over, and they need to steal it, and so on and so forth. So that all sort of plays into that ticketing game as well.
Oh, absolutely. If they don't have the sales tax revenue, they make it up for tickets until they get a chance to steal the to steal the stores back with an even bigger subsidy than was done to them. It's sort of this downward race to the bottom that this whole area from a tax-based perspective has been experiencing for 20 years.
All right, what's number 2?
Number 2, related, it's just simply abolish the State Department of Economic Development. It's an actively harmful organization. They do a very poor job. They give out about $400 million a year in tax credits, most of that for corporate welfare, for economic development tax credits. It doesn't work. It's harmful. It allows the state to try and dictate what type of growth we have in Missouri. They're not only just, it's not only that they don't succeed and just sort of are neutral. I mean, they actively fail. They actively make things worse. And we'd be better off phasing out those tax credits entirely, phasing out that corporate welfare entirely, and just giving tax cuts to everybody.
Isn't the reason why the GM plant in Wentzville and the Ford plant in Kansas City are here only because of those tax credits?
Well, that's what they would say. I mean, you hear about their quote unquote successes, and yes, it's great that the Ford plant and the GM plant are still here and operating.
Right.
But we've lost just as many auto plants, and look, we wouldn't be 49th out of 50 if what they were doing was working. And just because they can point to a few areas where jobs are still here, they never talk about their many, many, many failures, and the record on the whole is terrible.
All right, what's number 3?
Number 3 is let's take further advantage of privatization, and this is mostly at the local level, but it was great to see Arnold privatize their sewer system 2 months ago. I think that's going to be great for the people of Arnold. There are scores more opportunities just like that around the state. We documented in the paper I wrote last year, privatization in Missouri. Another huge local example would be the St. Louis City Water Division, which is just like St. Louis County is privatized and operated by the private sector and regulated by the State Public Service Commission. The city of St. Louis could sell off their water division, make a substantial amount of money, and the private sector could do an even better job running that division.
4.
User fees most importantly, tolling. If we want to improve our transportation infrastructure in this state, let's use tolling. Let's rebuild, expand, and toll I-70. That's the primary one we need it for, but we also need to consider tolling or use tolling for new bridges, for new highways that we may need in growing areas, and eventually, after 70 is reconstructed and expanded and improved, I'd like to next decade or so do I-44 and I-55 the same way.
Would you once it's redone? Does the toll stay there, or does the toll go away?
Hopefully, it would stay.
It would stay,
and you would
use
hopefully
it for other things and maintain and.
Right, it still costs a lot of money to maintain it. Just don't make a promise to people. That's what they famously did in Chicago back in the 60s. We'll build all these new highways, and 20 years from now, when the bonds are paid off, the toll will go away.
Right.
Then, of course, the toll didn't go away. Don't make that promise in the first place.
Right. and not build more tolls either.
Look, if you might be able to lower the toll for a period of time when the bond's paid off and now you're just maintaining, that's fine. But you keep the toll.
And 5.
5, and back a little more general, like the first one. Let's just embrace pro-growth and pro-economic freedom policies at the state and local level, and let's get rid of government-sanctioned cartels whenever possible. And the taxi cab cartel in St. Louis is a perfect example. Let's abolish the regional taxi cab commission. At a minimum, let's not allow it to cap the number of cabs that can operate. It would be far better if all it did was enforce insurance and safety requirements, but get rid of the certificate of need programs for taxi cabs, for hospitals and healthcare agencies. Stop letting the government tell entrepreneurs and the private sector when and where it can and can't invest its money.
There's no greater example, whether you agree or disagree with any and all of these 5, David Stokes, there's no greater example than this morning's news that Stan Kroenke wants to build a $1 billion stadium in Los Angeles with zero taxpayer support, where we're tripping over ourselves trying to figure out a way to give him money to build a stadium here that he doesn't want to build, and he's going to build one in California with no public dollars.
And that's thankfully where the trend's been going around the country for the past decade. And to give the Cardinals owners credit, at least their stadium, Missouri said no to significant support for the Cardinals.
Right.
The city and state said no to huge support. It was somewhat subsidized, but not very much. The Cardinals stadium was privately done primarily. Most of the new amazing stadiums around the country are now privately funded.
Right.
The way it was until about 1990, and the way it always should have been. Let's go back to that, and it is the perfect example right there, as you said.
But the fact that people are trying to trip over themselves to give Stan Kroenke something to build here, when it's all said and done, he would much rather build it by himself somewhere else. So how much do tax incentives and tax breaks and tax TIF increment financing work when he'd rather build it somewhere else on his own dime?
Well, it's a great example because that's one of the reasons that this type of economic development game fails, in that you incentivize capital. When you say you have to put this retail development on this corner to get this subsidy, well, that corner might not be the best place for retail stores, but because of a generous subsidy, somebody might build it there anyway because their risk is so greatly reduced. So that's what the economic studies, and we cite plenty of these in our work at the Show Me Institute. One of the reasons this game fails is because it encourages people to not make the best investment for their capital as people chase the subsidy. They'll go get the subsidy, but it really might not be that smart of an investment but for the subsidy. That doesn't mean that it justifies the subsidy. It means that their long-term plan is going to fail.
Right. Really interesting. Really interesting. All right. Coming up for 2015, anything we should look to for coming out of the Show Me Institute?
The Show Me Institute's going to be doing a lot of work on the tolling question, which I'm so happy that Governor Nixon and MoDOT and hopefully the state legislature are going to be very serious about considering, because I do think that look, the worst choice of all was the choice that the voters sank overwhelmingly in August, which was a sales tax for transportation infrastructure. I have no problem with gas taxes as far better than the general sales tax, but an even better primary way to fund infrastructure is tolling. So let's see St. Louis County embrace tolling for the South County Connector. Let's see the state embrace it for I-70, and the Show Me Institute will be heavily involved in that type of work.
The voters rejected a gas tax. The voters rejected a sales tax. So the only thing left is a toll road, because someone's got to pay to rebuild these roads and to maintain them and to make them viable for the 21st century.
Absolutely. And I do think, I forget the year that we last rejected the gas tax for roads.
And we're going back 10 years or so.
Yeah, I've got no problem with the state legislature putting a gas tax back before voters compared to a sales tax. I think that probably the best combination of all is for the legislature just to adopt a small gas tax. We're talking in the range of 2 cents or so to help fund the immediate needs. The legislature can do that
Right.
without a vote of the people. And then let's put a really solid tolling proposal out before the voters to say, let's change our Constitution to embrace tolling. Even so, you could do I-70 with privately financed tolls without having to go to the voters. That's at least MoDOT's opinion. That would likely be litigated.
How much would it cost to go from St. Louis to Kansas City?
It's
And-
unknown right now.
And the other thing was, people were saying it doesn't go from river to river. It goes from, say, outside, let's say Wentzville to somewhere in the suburbs of Kansas City, so it doesn't affect most of the people who use Highway 70.
Well, there's fair reasons for that, but that's why I say the exact cost of the toll is unknown, because they haven't finally settled on how long is the toll road going to be.
Right.
I mean, it's going to be more if it goes from river to river. It's unlikely to be, because that's going to increase collection costs if you're trying to collect tolls within St. Louis and Kansas City. We have so many more entrances, so many more exits.
Right.
I think it's probably a wise idea on their part to start it out in western St. Charles County and end it in eastern Jackson County, sort of the eastern suburbs of Kansas City,
Right.
and reduce your collection costs as part of that. But until they really have the exact specifications, but I think people should be looking in the range of about $20 to $30, hopefully a little bit less than that.
David Stokes, always a pleasure. Where can we read you at the Show Me Institute?
Well, this op-ed by Andy Wilson is up at the Post-Dispatch, and we've got a lot of information as well as our version of the op-ed at showmeinstitute.org. You can follow me on Twitter at David C. Stokes, and happy 2015.
Same to you.
Happy New Year. David Stokes, have a good week.
Thanks, McGraw. Thanks, Kelly.
8:50.